the doorbell rings. You pause. Something in your body tenses, barely noticeable, but there. You force a breath. You smile. You open the door. And in that moment, polite, warm, welcoming, something inside you retreats. They step in. Their voice fills the air. They mean well. They always do. But suddenly, the air in your home feels different. Not heavy, not hostile, just not yours anymore. You laugh. You offer tea. You ask about their day. You do everything right. But behind your eyes, there's a quiet echo. I want my space back. And after they leave, when the door finally closes, you stand in the silence, unsure why you feel so off, so scattered, so drained. You don't hate people. You're not ungrateful. You're not antisocial. But every time someone crosses that threshold, even the kindest ones, you feel yourself pull inward, like a flame protecting itself from the wind. You have blamed yourself for this. You have called it strange. You have hidden it with excuses. I'm just tired. It's been a long week. Maybe next time. But what if you were never meant to explain it away? What if this discomfort was not dysfunction? Carl Jung believed the home is more than walls and windows. He called it a symbol of the soul, a structure built not just with bricks, but with memory, emotion, and psychic energy. And the front door? It is not just a physical barrier. It's the sacred threshold between you and everything else. When someone steps into your space, they don't just bring conversation. They bring energy, unspoken tension, hidden stories. All of it lands inside your atmosphere, rearranging what was once still. Jung taught that sensitive souls, especially introverts, need solitude not out of avoidance, but out of necessity. They regenerate in silence. They remember who they are in stillness. So when a visitor enters, something in your unconscious says, mask up, be polite, be present. But your soul, it whispers the opposite. Keep it closed. Not because you're cold, not because you're broken, but because some parts of you are still in repair, still fragile, still forming. To Jung, this was not a flaw, it was a sacred signal, a boundary your unconscious erects when the outer world threatens the inner architecture. And maybe, just maybe, that discomfort you feel is not something to fix. It's something to listen to. So, what if you are not wrong for craving quiet? What if your resistance to visitors was never about them at all, but about your soul saying, not yet, I'm still healing? Carl Jung once said, the energy of the soul does not flow randomly. It follows the direction of desire, meaning, and preservation. To understand why someone entering your home feels so unsettling, you must first understand how your energy moves. Because for some people, it does not flow outward. It turns inward, like a river that disappears. Beneath the ground, carving silence into strength. Jung called this the distinction between two fundamental psychological orientations, the extrovert and the introvert. It's not about being talkative or quiet, not about confidence or awkwardness. It's about energy, and where the soul goes to recharge. The extrovert gathers power from the world. Social contact feeds them. Loud rooms excite them. People are not disruptions, they are fuel. But for the introvert, it's the opposite. Their energy withdraws from the world, like light pulling inward. They need solitude to recalibrate, stillness to remember who they are, and silence, not as an absence of sound, but as a restoration of self. So, when someone enters your space, even with kindness, even with good intentions, it creates a subtle but seismic shift in your energy field. They bring their stories, their presence, their rhythm. And that rhythm is not your own. You feel it immediately, like a frequency you did not choose. It fills the air, and suddenly, your mind does not feel like yours anymore. You're hosting now, which means you're no longer resting. Your thoughts speed up. Your awareness splits. Your energy moves outward, toward them. And in doing so, something inside you goes quiet, not in peace, but in suppression. Jung believed that the home is not just shelter, it's symbolic space, a container of your psyche. Every object in your home is charged with your energy. Every room is an extension of your emotional world. It's where you take off the mask, where your soul breathes unfiltered. But when someone enters that environment, even for a friendly chat, your entire system must shift. You clean, you plan, you perform, And the deeper truth, you prepare for war without calling it war, because it takes effort to maintain boundaries that were never meant to be crossed. Even the most casual visit can feel like a ritual interruption. What they see as kindness, you feel as chaos. What they see as comfort, you experience as contamination, not because of who they are, but because of what your soul has built in silence. Jung taught that the psyche is sensitive to energetic intrusions. For introverts, this is not just preference, it's biology of the soul. Too much external contact overloads the nervous system. Too much hosting breaks the mirror of the self. Too much presence of others leaves no room for your own. You don't just feel tired, you feel erased. And sometimes you can't even explain it until it's over, until the door is closed, until the silence returns. Only then do you feel yourself again. This is not antisocial behavior. This is psychic self-preservation. Imagine a candle flickering in the wind. That is your energy when someone walks in uninvited. Every breath they take disturbs the flame. Every word they speak shifts the air. Eventually, the light dims. That's what it feels like when someone enters your home without understanding your inner wiring. To them, it's just a visit. To you, it's an energetic storm. And when that threshold is crossed too often, your mind begins to shut down. You smile less. You think less clearly. You feel heavy, but not from weight, from presence. Jung believed that the most sacred parts of the self are quiet by nature, and anything that disrupts that quiet must be examined carefully. So, if you find yourself drained after even short visits, if you feel like your home has been shaken without ever being touched, know this. It is not weakness. It's the consequence of living with a sensitive, intelligent, and inward-moving soul, one that protects itself not with confrontation, but with stillness. You smile, you nod, you say, "Take a seat. Stay as long as you'd like." But your body is already waiting for them to leave, not because you're rude, not because you dislike them, but because something in you is performing, and it's been performing all day. Jung called it the persona, the social mask we wear to survive. It's the version of ourselves we put forward to be accepted, admired, and understood. It's not fake, but it's not the whole truth either. The persona smiles when the soul is tired. It entertains when the spirit wants silence. It plays host when the heart just wants peace. And for many people, especially introverts, empaths, and deep thinkers, this mask doesn't come off easily, not even at home. That's the tragedy, isn't it? Your home is supposed to be your sanctuary, but the moment someone enters, your sanctuary becomes a stage. You become an actor. Suddenly, you're monitoring your expressions, choosing your words carefully, listening attentively, responding politely, tracking the time, the temperature, the lighting, the noise, and with each moment, something inside you slips further away. You're no longer with yourself. You're managing the visit. Jung warned that the persona is necessary, but dangerous. Because when we wear it too long, we forget how to take it off. We begin to confuse the role with the self, and in doing so, we abandon something sacred within us. Authentic presence. That's why visits, even brief ones, feel exhausting. You're not just making coffee or small talk. You're sacrificing psychic energy to maintain the image. You say, "I'm happy you came," when what you mean is, "I wish I could just sit here in silence." You ask, "How's everything with work?" when your own mind is screaming for stillness. You keep smiling, even when the muscles in your face beg to rest. And this isn't just social fatigue, it's spiritual depletion, because every time you prioritize harmony over honesty, you betray a piece of yourself. That betrayal may be small, but it accumulates, and the more you perform, the less you feel real. Eventually, the house begins to feel like a theater. Every room, a different scene. The living room, where you act cheerful. The kitchen, where you prepare for performance. The bathroom, the only place you can breathe for 30 seconds. Even your bedroom, no longer a refuge but a recovery ward. And when they finally leave, you don't just feel tired, you feel hollow. As if you gave something you didn't want to give, and can't quite get it back. This is the silent cost of the persona, not the effort itself, but the invisibility that comes with it. Because who sees the version of you that didn't want to talk? Who hears the silence you were craving? Who feels the weight you carried just to make others feel welcome? No one, because your persona handled it. But your soul, the part of you that longs for stillness, authenticity, quiet truth, it felt every second. And here's what Jung would want you to know. The mask is not evil, but it must never become your home. You are allowed to remove it. You are allowed to say, not today. You are allowed to protect your space, your energy, your truth, even if it makes you seem distant. Because pretending is not connection, and peace is not a performance. Sometimes it's just a look, a comment, a tone in their voice. They didn't mean anything by it. It was casual, offhand, harmless, but it ruined your whole day. And you don't know why. You replay it. You wonder if you're too sensitive. You feel silly, even ashamed, for how deeply it affected you. But Carl Jung wouldn't call it silly. He'd call it a signal, a flare from a part of you that's been buried, until someone lit the match. That part is what Jung named the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's not darkness for the sake of darkness. It's everything you've had to push away to survive. Everything you've been told not to feel, not to express, not to be. Anger, shame, fear, desire, resentment, memories, pain, all locked behind the polite face, all hiding behind the persona. But it doesn't stay hidden forever, and sometimes all it takes is someone stepping into your space for the shadow to start whispering. Because your home, your silence, your solitude, that's where the shadow rests. Not peacefully, but quietly. It waits in the background, undisturbed, until someone enters. Until their presence shifts the air, and then, suddenly, something stirs. You feel it, but can't name it. You smile, but feel the tension rising beneath your skin. You're polite, but inside, you're tightening, shutting down, withdrawing. A casual remark becomes a wound. Their laughter feels too loud, their energy too invasive. Even their kindness feels like pressure. You don't hate them, but something in you resents the exposure, because every word they say bounces off more than just your ears. It brushes against the shadow, and the shadow remembers. Jung said, "What you do not bring to consciousness will appear in your life as fate." That's why your discomfort isn't random. It's not about being antisocial. It's not about arrogance. It's about psychic protection. When someone enters your home, they're not just entering your physical space. They're entering your emotional field, your symbolic territory. And without knowing it, they may be stepping on landmines, unprocessed grief, childhood abandonment, humiliation you never spoke about, a part of you that learned early on to stay quiet, and now shakes at the sound of someone else's voice in your space. They're not the threat, but their presence threatens the balance you've built to keep your inner world safe. And so, the shadow acts, not with violence, not with drama, but with resistance, a sudden irritability, a desire to be alone, an unease you can't explain, a withdrawal that feels cold, even to yourself. You don't mean to be distant, but something in you says, protect. That's the shadow's voice, and if you ignore it long enough, it doesn't disappear. It grows, it hardens, it shapes your habits, your preferences, your defenses, until you find yourself turning down invitations, dreading the doorbell, feeling your stomach twist at the thought of someone coming over. Not because you're unfriendly, but because your soul remembers what your conscious mind tries to forget. Jung believed that the shadow is not the enemy, but it demands respect, because what lives in the shadow, if ignored, becomes the architect of our discomfort, our distance, our distrust. But when acknowledged, it becomes a compass. So, the next time someone visits and you feel something shift, don't dismiss it, don't shame it, don't rationalize it away. Instead ask, what part of me is being touched right now? Because maybe they didn't just bring themselves, maybe they brought a message, a trigger, a mirror, and your discomfort. It wasn't the problem, it was the message, a reminder that your soul is still protecting something fragile, something unfinished, something sacred, and it's asking you, gently but firmly, to keep it safe. To Carl Jung, a house was never just bricks and windows. It was a symbol, a blueprint of the soul, with each room echoing something internal, intimate, and unseen. The walls, they hold memories. The floors, they carry the weight of your identity. And the front door, it's not just wood and hinges. It's a sacred boundary, the line between who you are and what the world tries to bring in. You live here, but not just physically. You sleep in the bedroom, the space of intimacy, dreams, vulnerability. You gather in the living room, the face you show to others, your social skin. You eat in the kitchen, the place of emotional nourishment. You store things in the attic, high thoughts, forgotten ideas, and beneath it all, the basement waits, dark, unvisited, holding everything you've pushed down, your traumas, your rejections, your silence. This is not just metaphor, it's psychological architecture. And for those who are inwardly sensitive, introverts, empaths, seekers, this structure isn't just meaningful, it's sacred, because when you spend your life absorbing the noise of the world, your home becomes the only place you can hear your own voice. It's where the persona drops, where the shadow softens, where you can feel without filtering, exist without performing, rest without retreating. But then, someone knocks, and that knock echoes louder than it should. Because when they cross the threshold, they're not just stepping into your home, they're stepping into your symbolic self, and your unconscious feels it. They enter the living room, and your social mask activates. They complement the kitchen, and your inner nourishment is pulled into performance. They ask to use the bathroom, and your boundary slips just slightly. They may never go near your bedroom or your basement, but their presence triggers the alarm in your psyche. This is no longer a closed system. Even if you like them, even if you invited them, even if they mean well, they bring more than conversation. They bring stories, emotions, tension, energy. And energy has weight. It lingers. It moves your furniture, not physically, but spiritually. And if your symbolic house is still under construction, if there are rooms you haven't dared to enter yet, then every visitor risks stumbling into spaces even you haven't explored. That's why, for many, an uninvited guest doesn't feel like company. It feels like an invasion, not of privacy, but of psyche. And your reaction? That sudden discomfort, that urge to retreat, that tightness in your chest. It's not overreaction, it's the unconscious trying to keep the structure stable. Jung taught that symbolic space is as real as physical space. And when we protect our homes, we are also protecting our inner arrangement. So, the next time you feel uneasy at the sound of footsteps in your hall, when your silence is broken and your rhythm disrupted, you're not strange, you're not selfish, you're protecting the mirror. Because in Jungian psychology, your house is you, and no one enters it, physically or symbolically, without shifting something inside. You feel it before it makes sense. A heaviness in your chest when someone overstays their welcome. A subtle panic when the doorbell rings. An ache for silence in the middle of small talk. You call it tiredness, burnout, irritability. But Carl Jung called it something else. The call of the hermit. In Jungian psychology, the hermit is more than a lonely figure with a lantern. He is an ancient archetype, the soul's instinct to withdraw, not in weakness, but in wisdom. The hermit doesn't run away from the world. He turns inward to find what the world can't give him. And when someone steps into your space and your whole being recoils, you're not being rude. You're being summoned, not by discomfort, but by the part of you that knows you're not ready to share this space yet. You're still healing something sacred. This is the quiet beginning of individuation, the process Jung described as becoming who you truly are, beneath all masks, noise, and expectation. But individuation doesn't begin in applause. It begins in solitude. The hermit doesn't isolate to disappear. He isolates to reassemble, because before you can face the world, you must face yourself. And that process isn't loud. It doesn't happen at parties. It doesn't thrive under constant conversation. It requires emptiness, stillness, distance, silence thick enough to hear the subtle voice within. The discomfort you feel with visitors, it's not dysfunction. It's the hermit calling, saying, "Step back. You've given too much. Come home, not just to your house, but to yourself." Because hosting someone else too often means evicting yourself from your own soul. You clean the room, you set the table, you answer the questions. But afterward, when the silence returns, you realize you were never truly present. You were performing, translating, managing. And the hermit sees this. He waits patiently. He doesn't judge. He simply asks, "Is it time yet? Time to return inward. Time to remove the persona. time to sit with your shadow in the basement of your own psyche. Jung believed the unconscious only reveals itself in quiet and aloneness, that without solitude, we remain strangers to ourselves. Because what lives in your depths doesn't shout, it whispers. And you can't hear it if the room is full. The hermit invites you to close the door, not in bitterness, but in reverence. To sit in a quiet room until the mask slips, the noise fades, and the real questions begin. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I feel when no one interrupts me? What is trying to speak when everything else is silent? These aren't questions for crowds. They're not asked at dinner tables. They rise when you've had enough of distraction, performance, and politeness. And they are terrifying, because in solitude the answers are raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable, true. That's why so many fear the hermit, because he doesn't let you escape yourself. But if you stay, if you let the silence teach you, you begin to sense something forming inside you. Not loneliness, but inner light. Not emptiness, but depth. The hermit doesn't stay withdrawn forever. He returns eventually, but not as who he was. He returns with clarity, with peace, with a soul that no longer fears being misunderstood, because now he understands himself. So, when you feel the urge to cancel plans, to avoid the knock at the door, to close the blinds and rest in the silence, don't call it antisocial. Call it sacred. It might be your inner hermit gently guiding you toward the one thing most people never find, the quiet, unshakable truth of who you really are. You've felt it before, that strange tension between what you want and what you're supposed to want. They say, come out just for a bit. Don't be like that. You're no fun anymore. So you say yes. You open the door, you host, you smile. But inside, your soul is whispering, you said yes to them, but no to me. We live in a culture that worships visibility. Be available, be accessible, be social, responsive, agreeable. The more present you are to others, the more valuable you appear. And so, the idea of closing the door, physically or emotionally, feels like a violation of that script. We call it antisocial. We call it rude. We call it selfish. But Carl Jung had another word for it: necessary. Jung believed that individuation, the path to becoming your truest self, requires space. Not just physical distance, but psychic sovereignty. You cannot hear your inner voice if you're constantly tuned to the volume of others. And so, one of the most radical things you can do for your soul is this: say no, without apology, without guilt, without over-explaining. Just no. Because no is not rejection, it's direction. It's choosing stillness over social noise. It's choosing self-respect over social performance. It's choosing alignment over appearance. And it's not always easy, because the world doesn't like when you close the door. They take it personally. They think it means something about them, but it doesn't. It means something about you. It means your soul has learned to recognize its limits, its cycles, its energy patterns. It means you've stopped abandoning yourself just to be accepted by others. That is not selfishness. That is sovereignty. And if you don't protect your energy, no one else will. Jung taught that the psyche must be treated with the same care as the body. Just as you rest when you're physically sick, you must also retreat when you're emotionally overexposed. So here are some Jungian-inspired practices for preserving your psychic energy. Notice your body before your mind. When someone asks you for time, does your chest tighten? Does your breath shorten? Your body knows before your brain admits it. Honor the no that arises without justification. You don't need a full calendar or a valid excuse. The feeling is enough. Create sacred spaces in your routine. Morning silence, an evening walk, a no-guest rule after sunset. Boundaries don't have to be dramatic, just consistent. Speak simply. Saying, "I need time for myself," is not rude, it's honest. The people meant for you will understand. The rest will reveal themselves. Because every time you override your boundaries for politeness, you pay in spiritual currency. Your light dims, your clarity clouds, your resentment builds quietly in the corners of your being. But every time you protect your space, you're not just defending a room, you're defending a self. And Jung believed that protecting your inner life was a moral responsibility, not just a personal one. Because no one can hear your soul if it's always performing. So, let them think what they want. You don't owe access to everyone who knocks. Your home is not a stage, your mind is not a waiting room, your soul is not public property. You are allowed to keep it closed. You don't hate people. You're not bitter, you're not broken, you're just listening to something most people spend their lives ignoring. Your soul. And your soul speaks in silence. It doesn't shout at parties. It doesn't interrupt conversations. It doesn't compete with noise. It waits quietly for the moment you stop performing long enough to hear it. That's what solitude is. Not absence, not escape, but return. A return to center, to clarity, to wholeness. Carl Jung believed that the path to individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, begins not with noise, but with withdrawal. It begins the moment you stop seeking validation and start seeking truth. And that truth often waits behind a closed door, behind canceled plans, behind unanswered messages, behind weekends where no one visits and nothing needs to be said. You sit in your room. The house is quiet. And slowly, a different kind of sound rises, not from outside, but from within. Your thoughts soften. Your nervous system recalibrates, your breath slows, and in that stillness, you begin to recognize yourself again. Not the version others see, not the persona you perform, but the one who exists underneath it all, untouched, unedited, whole. This is the power of solitude, not because it makes you better than others, but because it makes you honest with yourself. And that honesty is healing, because only in silence can the fragments come together. Only in solitude can the inner voices be heard, the scattered parts return, the wounds begin to close. This is not loneliness, this is integration, and integration is how you become whole. You don't need to be constantly present in the world to matter. You don't need to explain your retreat to be worthy. You don't need to invite everyone in to be kind. Your boundaries are not rejections, they are alignments. Your silence is not absence, it is sacred space. Jung saw solitude as a sacred phase, not the end of connection, but the preparation for a deeper one. Because when you protect your energy, when you honor the silence your soul craves, when you choose stillness over obligation, you aren't shutting the world out. You're preparing to return to it whole, with presence, with depth, with truth in your eyes and peace in your bones. You're no longer performing, you're no longer pleasing. You're no longer editing yourself just to be accepted. You're returning as someone who has met their inner world and survived it and honored it and brought back something real. So the next time you feel that strange pull to be alone, honor it. It's not a defect. It's not a weakness. It's the beginning of wholeness. And it starts exactly where you are, in the quiet behind the closed door, where your soul finally has room to speak.